It's 3:15 in the morning on November 30th of 1989, and we're in New York City. Linda Napolitano and two other people are abducted by aliens, floated out their apartment windows on beams of blue light, and accompanied by classic gray aliens to a UFO hovering over the Brooklyn Bridge. Over 100 people witnessed this, including the then president of the United Nations and two of his top intelligence officers. Once aboard the craft, Linda has an object inserted into her nose. An object inserted into her nose. The UN president is extremely concerned about aliens invading Earth and abducting people, so his two intelligence officers repeatedly abduct and interrogate Linda. At one point, they even remove her shoes to see if she has webbed feet.
I tried to wake my husband. Eyes still closed, and there was no response from my husband. And that's when I did open my eyes and I looked straight ahead. And there was this thing, this creature, standing at the foot of my bed. And it was the first time I had ever seen that consciously. I was awake. I hadn't gone to sleep yet. I was saying my prayers. So by this time, my legs were numb. And I sat up in bed, dragging my heavy legs with me, and turned up behind me and threw a pillow, big pillow, that I made. You would think that I stuffed them with rocks because it was heavy. And I hit him too, that creature. And my next conscious memory, fragmented memory, was seeing white fabric flow up and over my eyes and then down again. And then I felt something, perhaps little fists or maybe an instrument, pounding on my back. And that was all I remembered. And then my next conscious memory was that of falling into my bed. I could have fallen anywhere from 2 inches up or 2 feet up or whatever, but I was conscious and I felt myself fall into bed.
It was November 30th, 1989.
My 10th birthday.
It occurred about 3:15 in the morning. I had just finished doing some backlogged laundry, and I was working full time, and I had 2 boys to raise, and so I had all that laundry. Well, anyway, I finished the laundry and I went to bed, and it was about a week after Thanksgiving, and I don't know. I suddenly felt this numbness travel from my toes up, to the rest of my body, and I knew right away what that meant. And then I started to smell that odor again. It smelled like almonds. And so I said to myself, you know what? Before the rest of my body becomes numb, I'm just going to protect myself and my family. And I saw this creature standing at the foot of the bed. By now, my knees are numb. And then it got on top of the bed, and it crouched down, looked me straight in the eyes, and hissed. They hissed. It was gray. Before I knew it, the rest of my body was numb except my arms, so I picked up a decorative pillow, and I threw it at this creature. And it fell back. And then I had that afterthought, well, now it's going to get even with me and hurt my family. By that time, after that, I don't know what happened. The next thing I remembered, I felt myself fall into my bed. It could have been from 8 feet or 2 feet or maybe even 2 inches, but I just plopped right back into my bed.
Shortly after this experience, Linda's nose begins to hurt a little, so she goes in for an x-ray and discovers that there is, in fact, a metal object inserted deep within the nasal cavity of her skull. A month later, another x-ray reveals that the object is now gone. The doctors are perplexed as there is no record or memory of any surgeries. Was she abducted again?
Well, I was contacted by 2 of the witnesses by letter, and they found out about the 3rd witness a little later on, and then ultimately the 4th witness. I received a letter from her and have dealt with her on a personal basis. There's a fifth witness who I dealt with earlier who had seen the UFO from another point of view. She had not seen the figures floating in the air, but she had seen the UFO at exactly that hour on that night. So there are obviously many other witnesses. And essentially from some distance, it's about a quarter of a mile, she saw this very large ship above the building. And this occurred after the motor died in her car, and the car stopped, and the lights went out in the car and on the bridge, and on the bridge roadway. And several other cars also stopped with their lights out. No one knew what was happening to the cars, why everybody's automobiles were stopping. And she looked to her right and saw this enormous object, very, very brightly lit above a building. And then blue-white light came out from the bottom of it, and she, at that point, saw these figures. She didn't know what they were at that time. They looked like balls. They were people rolled up in a kind of fetal position, came popping out of the window, 12 stories off the ground. And they all unfolded at once, and then were taken up quickly into the craft, this whole thing taking roughly about 12 seconds. And then the craft moved away. And her descriptions exactly corroborate the descriptions of the two intelligence security agents in the car down below who were accompanying an important political figure. They all saw the same thing that the women saw, except they were closer.
Under a hypnosis session with Bud Hopkins, Linda was able to recall what happened before she was dropped back in bed. The gray alien puts a type of white cloth over her which causes her entire body to become numb and immobile. A blue beam of light fills her room with light. She is then levitated out of bed, folded into a fetal position, and is floated on the beam of light through the closed window, through glass panes and metal bars, and out into the night air. Her body is then unfolded, and she is accompanied by 3 little gray aliens as they float on the beam of light through the Manhattan skies. Linda can see the city lights, cars driving, smoke from chimneys, and all the life of Manhattan below. The beam of blue light takes them inside a waiting UFO that is hovering near the Brooklyn Bridge. 25 witnesses later report seeing this, making it one of the largest mass sightings in American history. Once inside the craft, she finds herself in a long hallway with benches along the sides. The power of the blue light is still carrying her along down the long hallway and through several sliding doors. She's finally carried into a large room with 3 gray aliens and a long table in the middle of the room. She is levitated onto the table. She can't move, but realizes that she can move her mouth, jaws, and cheeks. She starts to scream, and her screams strangely rebound on the large dome of the alien operating room and are amplified and echoed greatly. One of the Greys reacts and puts his hand over her mouth, trying to quiet her, but this only makes her scream louder and louder. Another one of the beings inserts a long metal tube into her nose and fires a small object into her left nostril. She blacks out for a few seconds and wakes up as she falls back into bed. She considers the entire thing to be a dream and goes to sleep. Over the next few days, memories of the experience fade. Witnesses. Being that this event occurred in Manhattan, even at 3 a.m., there were a lot of witnesses. Over 25 called in to report this to the police within 24 hours. Over time, over 100 witnesses came forward. One of the more interesting and significant witnesses were the President of the United Nations, Javier Pérez de Cuellar, who, along with 2 of his top intelligence officers, Richard and Dan, witnessed 3 people, including Linda, get pulled out of their apartments and floated into the waiting UFO. Even though it took a year for them to come forward, the 2 intelligence officers would go on to abduct and interrogate Linda, even taking her shoes off to check if her feet were webbed. Evidently, Mr. Pérez de Cuellar was shocked by what he had witnessed and considered humanity to be under attack. Richard and Dan become obsessed with Linda and visit her to share stories. Dan becomes particularly obsessed and they abduct her again. He tells her they have met before and are meant to be together. He begs her to have sex and she rejects him. Bud Hopkins later theorizes that they had all been abducted together since childhood and therefore had some knowledge of each other. Linda sees Richard again sometime later, and he lets her know that Dan has suffered a mental breakdown and been committed to a care facility. Further hypnosis sessions and witness reports would later reveal that the UFO took off and plunged into the East River after abducting Linda. Linda and Dan had been abducted many times together as kids and may have been intimate on the ship during the abductions. When Linda was dropped back in bed, she was not able to wake her husband or her children for a few hours. Richard, Dan, and the Secretary General of the United Nations had a group memory emerge that after the UFO plunged into the East River, they found themselves on a beach together. Nearby, there is Linda and 3 of the gray aliens digging in the sand. Linda pulls something out of the sand and brings it over to the men. She's holding a fish in her hand and screams at them, "Look and see what you have done." One of the aliens then says, "Lady of the Sands." At this point, the men notice that the aliens have no toes. As the aliens and Linda begin walking back towards the water, the men find themselves back at the car. In an odd twist of things, the Secretary General is on top of the car while the men are on the ground and have to help him down. Books have been written and movies have been made about what is now one of America's most famous UFO cases. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like and subscribe to make sure you don't miss a thing. Please check out our other videos, including our ongoing series about UFO and UAP history.